This has been a long time coming, and I couldn't be more excited to share it with you. I'm currently standing in the green room of our very own studio, and in this video I'm going to show it to you, and I'm also going to tell you about how we turned a pipe dream into a rundown mess into the beautiful studio we have today. Come on, let's go. Alright, so our studio consists of 3 rooms. First, a spacious live room set up to record any instrument you throw at it, as well as large enough for a full band to practice and workshop ideas before pressing record. Next, our isolated control room set up with our finest equipment to make sure the audio is sounding its best, both on the way in and on the way out. And finally, our green room for taking a break in a different space. But getting to this point wasn't easy, and there were a lot of obstacles to overcome. The first of which was actually finding a space, which took about 2 years to accomplish. Diligently searching through Craigslist and other websites for commercial space every day felt like a pointless endeavor a lot of the time. Places were either charging way too much for what they were offering, or they would start to back out once they heard that we were going to make noise louder than regular speaking volume. It turns out, finding a space in New York City that will allow you to smash on the drums at all hours isn't really easy to do. In the end, we decided to team up with our friends Frisco and Brian from Rockaway Beach Studios to co-run a space together. Brian you might remember from the People You See at DIY Shows video, and Frisco you might remember from, well, being in the Pigeon Pack.
My name is Frisco.
RBS actually already had their own studio, but they were looking to get a bigger space for their acts. They also knew that we were looking for a studio space of our own. With this collaboration, we'd be able to pool our resources together to have a better space with better gear. It's a win-win for everyone. Then, it just so happened that a larger studio was opening in the same space as their old studio, so we all jumped on the opportunity. Getting the space was only half the battle, however, because it didn't look like this when we got it. No, instead it looked like this. Let me show you what we did to renovate, starting with the deconstruction.
Yeah. That's how it's gonna be the entire time of doing this. It's like you get done with something, then you're like,
We started the project by working on the live room and the control room while leaving the green room for last. The green room would be the least important in terms of a working studio, and we also decided that we needed to have some space for storage and for taking a break in a different space. The walls of the live room and the control room were the biggest project within the deconstruction phase because they were all covered in various types of cheap sound absorption. So the first thing to do was remove all that stuff. In the live room, an incredible number of screws were used for these pads, which we had to unscrew one by one. Meanwhile, in the control room, the foam pads there were glued on. This left some pretty funky designs on the walls once they were removed. Not quite the vibe we were going for, though. There was also this large board of plywood on one of the walls. We were hoping that the wall behind it would be relatively clean.
Yeah, I knew this was gonna happen! I knew this was gonna happen!
so the wallpaper that's being ripped up, is that easy to just like?
That's fine, sorry.
That's not a big deal.
No, that's just the paper that's on the sheetrock.
Sheetrock. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean sheetrock. Shit, that's no
I
problem to
literally
like
can take this
fix.
off.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yeah, but you
Okay.
can't
It's not too
take-
much of a pain in the ass.
Nah.
though. Okay.
It's like a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it is what it is. You know, we gotta
Okay.
get
Yeah.
this shit out of here.
Yeah. All right.
She did it!
Yeah, we've got a stunt room!
The foam pit.
Foam pit.
Ew!
Yeah, this is just the foam pit, right?
Now I smell.
Yeah.
Good thing I didn't land on this.
Oh god. After bagging up what we could and throwing everything into the green room, we sanded down the walls to get rid of any glue or irregularities.
Thinking we get a sander
Uh-huh.
and then
A
just
sanding
sand the whole
disc,
fucking thing
because
on.
this is too much work.
Yeah, this sucks. Next, we spackled the walls, filling up all the holes left by all the screws and whatnot that were on them. Some of those holes were really big.
Okay. Got it.
After that, we sanded again, and then we spackled again, and then sanded again. All of this left quite a mess of dust all over the floors and walls, so we did our first round of vacuuming in the space. We also tried mopping the walls to make extra sure there was no remaining dirt on them.
Hey! I'm peeing here.
Before the next step, we moved all of the remaining large furniture into the center of each room and papered the floors everywhere else. With that, it was time to start painting. These rooms felt so much bigger after we got that first coat of primer on. Once the walls were primed, we finally needed to decide on colors. This was the first decision in aesthetics that we all had to come to an agreement on, which meant we took a really long time with it. RBS wanted the live room to have a pretty neutral look that would look good with any band's vibe. While we didn't have any specific requirements on our end, we just wanted the place to look nice. We went with a light gray on the walls, with black being our main accent color. After we hung up some molding, the place really started coming together. For the control room, we just needed to ensure that the colors we chose didn't clash with the studio desk that was coming in. We went with a very light blue and a blue-green accent.
Yeah, homie. Now we're chilling at home.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
You probably wouldn't notice that the walls are different colors in each room, but I promise that the gray in the live room would look terrible with the blue-green accent in this room. It might seem a bit strange, but this is when we decided to bring in the studio desk. The next step on our agenda was actually to start building the bass traps or acoustic paneling. However, we needed the desk in the room to decide what kind and how many bass traps we'd actually need. You see, the control room is not very large, and it's nearly cubic in shape, which is basically terrible for audio. Also, one of the walls has the door and the window into the live room, while the opposite wall has this shelf. All these considerations needed to be taken into account when deciding where the desk would sit in the room. The room needed to be ergonomic while also doing the best it could acoustically, and that was not really something that we could just do on paper. So while Frisco and Brian were researching the best construction for our bass traps, I took to disassembling the desk. I was lucky to have pretty clear instructions from the assembly process, so the only major difficulty here was having enough space to move around in the room. Since I was deconstructing the desk, I also decided it was time to do a pretty major repair on the mixer that lives inside it. Get subscribed and stay tuned for a video about that. After the heart-pumping drive shuttling the parts over to the studio, I got to rebuilding the desk in the control room. When it was complete, we moved the desk around in a few configurations before settling on this wall to face. We also used the program Room EQ Wizard to decide the best exact location for the desk. Room EQ Wizard, or RU, uses your monitors and a reference microphone to read the acoustic properties of your room. We found our best bet was about 12.5 inches away from the wall. However, the readout was still pretty garbage since we didn't have any acoustic treatment in here. But now that the desk was properly situated, we were able to decide how many bass traps we need and where to place them. We already did a lot, but there's so much more we had to do here. In the next video, we'll start building and placing our bass traps, and also really start getting this place looking like a studio. Get subscribed so you see when the next upload is, and we've got a lot more videos about how we built this place out and other things we did. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this, please leave a like, leave a comment, let us know, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
You know what's great about filming everybody with masks on? I could just overdub whatever I want.
Oh, no.
There it is.